Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 11 o'clock. My name is Thomas Bowles. I'm the Ag Extension Agent here in Prince William County, and welcome to this week's class, which is on native plants. We have two presenters for you, Master Gardeners Gene Bennett and Jannell Bryant, and they will be talking to you about native plants, and I believe we're ready to go. Gene is up first. Gene, are you ready?
Ready now. Okay, good morning, everyone. And as my name's Gene Bennett, so I'm going to start off this presentation. Specifically, we're going to focus on plants native to the Piedmont region of Prince William County. And since part of Prince William County in Virginia is located in the coastal region, we will address those as well. Now, I know that I need to tell you that Jannell and I developed this presentation for Prince William County Master Gardeners that are basically beginning gardeners. But all of the concepts that we will present to you today and all the information we will present to you today is relative to just knowing things you need to know about growing native plants and encouraging you to do that. I recognize there are people from other states, but again, the principles are the same. So I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to explain what you need to learn about them. I'm going to try to encourage you to grow them and in the process, make your gardening chores a little bit easier. Jannell will show you beautiful pictures of native plants. There's so many. What she'll show you is just the tip of the iceberg, but again, you'll see that there really are so many beautiful plants. So I'm going to talk to you about what natives are. I think I lost a slide, Thomas, but that's okay. So what are natives? Natives are, the definition of a native plant is a plant that has grown naturally in an area without human intervention. And they've adapted to the local weather, the wildlife, the rainfall conditions in a particular area. In North America, plant species are generally described as native if they occurred here prior to European settlement. This distinction is made because of large-scale changes that have occurred since European settlement. So we're talking, hundreds of years, several centuries ago. These settlers intermingled plants that they brought with them from Europe with natives, and often they were displacing the native plants. So the ecosystem changed a lot with European settlement. And then other immigrants also intermingled plants from Asia and other parts of the world. They also brought some beneficial things like vegetables and grains, but for ordinary gardens and everything, a lot of things were displaced. But the important thing about natives is that they naturally adapt to the soil, the climate, and the wildlife around them. Okay, so why natives? To quote the Native Wildlife Society of Virginia, as open space disappears, and we know that's happening all the time as our population increases and we continue to build housing development, it becomes increasingly necessary to look at our own landscapes as a refuge for biodiversity. Native organisms, including plants, mammals, birds, amphibians, and insects, create an intricate web of life, which we're beginning to learn more and more about every day. This is a wonderful natural orchestration with each species life cycle, highly dependent on the other. So you'll hear the term biodiversity. It's important that you understand that concept, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But why native plants? They provide lots of diversity of color, texture, and form for a beautiful garden. And you have native plants growing basically all year long. They form this natural web of life that you live in. There is a relationship between soil, microorganisms, plants, and pollinators. The bees, birds, and butterflies, and four-legged creatures and other animals. They all depend on each other. And when you take out one piece of that, you disrupt what we call biodiversity, and it's one of the reasons why native plants are so important. Just think about if you like birds in your yard, you're not going to have birds in your yard if you don't have the caterpillars for the baby birds, if you don't have the trees that the caterpillars and the shrubs that the caterpillars grow on, you don't have the other insects that they eat, if you don't have amphibians, you don't have the native plants that provide the support for them, and if you don't have the microorganisms in the soil, then you don't have biodiversity. So they provide that habitat for conservation for native wildlife, birds, bees, butterflies, and others. And they help clean our water. So native plants improve soil fertility, reduce erosions. They're more adaptable to the native soil. And so that's one, those are some of the reasons. And they apply to any part of the country. Again, we're focused on Virginia. So here are some of their characteristics. They occur naturally in each region where they evolved. So, each region has its own unique set of native plants. They tend to be more resistant to herbivores such as deer, rabbit, and insect damage. I'm not saying there won't be any, but they're more resistant to it because those things need to have food also, but you'll find that your native plants survive a lot better. They occur in communities that grow well with other plants. They won't outcompete each other for the most part, and whereas invasive plants or plants that don't occur naturally can crowd out native plants and disrupt that biodiversity. And they can resist drought, bad insects, and diseases more readily than non-native plants, which translates to less maintenance on your part and less cost as well. Okay. They're valuable for conservation and restoration projects. If you, we have a lot of construction in all of our neighborhoods, no matter where you're from. They're extremely valuable in reconstructing those areas to prevent erosion, reduce runoff, and improve soil fertility much better than non-native plants will. They're really important for the microorganisms in the soil that help build up the soil to make it viable. And it's really important in new housing developments where they take off a lot of the topsoil that has been removed. And there are areas of your yard that need plants to grow. You should really focus on planting native plants because they'll grow more readily and they'll restore that natural balance. They also, they reduce costs because they take less fertilizer. They don't need as many pesticides, and compost is the best fertilizer. You also should, you'll need less pesticides. You should always make sure that you contact your local extension office before you use a pesticide to see if there are better ways to minimize that damage. They also require less watering because they also have evolved with the local climate. I mentioned that non-native plant species can outcompete and displace plants. If you, and they lack natural controls for insects and pests because they won't support the good bugs that will take care of the bad bugs, okay? If you, they also can invade your aquatic features, which will cause clogged waterways, disrupt ground flows, and lead to dramatic changes in native plants and animals, okay? In summary, here's a kind of a thumbnail comparison of natives versus non-natives. Natives are more cost-effective, use less water and pesticide. They're adaptable to the climate and soil, and they provide the shelter, better shelter for food for butterflies, birds, and good bugs, and support soil fertility. Non-natives require much more water, fertilizers, and soil amendments because they haven't evolved with the soil around them. They support fewer number of local wildlife, and they have little or no benefit to soil fertility. So they won't support the microorganisms in the soil that actually help the plants grow and provide the natural fertilizer for plants. Oh, one thing I want to mention about that previous chart is the U.S. Department of Agriculture also produces a book that you can find online that's called Non-Native Invasive Plants of Southern Forests. And it's a very good reference to know, things that really can damage your ecosystem. I highly recommend you take a look at that book, particularly if you're planting trees. Growing natives. Right plant, right place principle always applies. Native plants are like any other plants. They have different sun requirements. They have different water requirements. A lot of them will grow in clay, which is fortunate for those of us who live in clay soil. But some will require more fertile soil. So you need to check their requirements and grow them in the right place. Let's see. An example of that is that, red buds and native dogwoods are best grown along woodlands where they get dappled sun and shade, which is their native habitat. If you take black-eyed Susans or brown-eyed Susans, they require lots of sun, and so they support pollinators very well. Consider your soil requirements. Always do a soil test to check the pH and the nutrient level. You'll find some native plants can grow in acidic soil with a lower pH. Then there are others that require a higher pH, just like any other plant. So always make sure you do that soil test. You can save money by getting small plants, but remember, and there are a lot of there's some native nurseries I'll mention a little bit that do sell smaller plants started from seed, but the first year you'll plant this little native plant and it doesn't look like much. The next year it kind of creeps and pops up, but in the third year they tend to leap. So, when you plant a small native plant, make sure that you're patient. And you generally, not all of them, but you generally need to divide them every 3 years. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the Piedmont region and the fall line and so forth of Prince William County. Okay, this is Prince William County, just an outline of it. And you'll see everything in the brown is the Piedmont region. Those dots are some of the bigger cities. You'll see the Potomac River is the blue on the left, and then the yellow area is the yellow coastal plain. The reason why that's important is because there are different native plant lists. They're different regions. So if you're looking for a plant list for the Piedmont region, make sure you get the right list. Or if you live in the coastal plain part of Prince William County, then you would look for that particular plant list. Just to highlight for those of you who are out of state, there are, the Piedmont goes through a small part of Maryland, goes through part of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And so, you need to check with your local Master Gardener's extension office or through one of the educational institutions to check and see what the plant list would be for your part of the Piedmont or the coastal region. Okay. This is plant hardiness zones, and this is important to understand because when you look at plant labels, when you buy plants, you'll see that what their range of or hardiness zone is from. So for Virginia, most of it resides in zone 7. And you'll see that on the east side or on the right side of the map there. You'll also notice that zone 7, and it refers to average temperatures, is in Washington State. and through other parts of the United States. The plant list for the native plants in Virginia are not the same as those in Washington State, because even though it's the same temperature zone, they have different soil requirements and different rainfall levels and so forth. So, again, just check your hardiness zone, check what region you're in, and look for the native plant list. Okay, buying natives. There are specialty growers, and many of your larger nurseries are beginning to actually stock some native plants, basically because consumers are demanding that, and so they'll adjust to what the consumer wants. But there are more and more that are actually have native plants. Make sure that when you're looking for a native plant that you use the botanical name. If you don't know, you can easily look it up. If you're looking for black-eyed Susans, or if you're looking for a redbud tree, go online. You can find the botanical name of the native species. You don't want all the cultivars and so forth. You want the native species. Look for that botanical name, and then go into your nursery. If they don't have it, say, can you get it for me? Because that's the only way, having that Latin name is the only way you can ensure you're getting the right thing. If you don't know what you're looking for, you can check out the Virginia Native Plant Society, and each state will have their own they'll have their own land-grant college where you can find information about the local plants for your area. Your Master Gardener Extension offices will have that also. Use local growers and nurseries that have nursery propagated local species, and those are growing as well. Do not harvest plants in the woods or other natural areas. That's really important because, first of all, they exist there because that is their environment there, and a lot of them are endangered, so you don't want to disturb them from their natural environment. There's an organization in Virginia called Earth Sangha, which is out, they have a nursery out in the Springfield area. They sell a lot of native plants started from seed. The plants will be small when you get them, but again, remember they sleep, creep, and leap. And you can get native plants there. They're all started from seeds. And then there are you're able to find native plants online much more easily. One thing planting native plants just really so important for the reasons I talked about above. Not all alien species, or non-native species pose a threat. For example, we grow a lot of crepe myrtles in Virginia. They provide absolutely no benefit, but they actually don't do much harm either. But always avoid invasive species. If you go on to Department of Conservation and Recreation or the Department of Agriculture websites, you can find what the invasive species are for various areas, or check with your extension offices again. They will tell you what the invasive species are. Do not plant them. Again, if you're in doubt, check with your extension office. Some good resources I just quickly want to mention. Doug Ptolemy has some books out. His latest book is Nature's Best Hope, which talks about the importance of local home gardeners planting native plants because so many of the natural areas have been destroyed for native plants. So home growers are actually part of the answer for helping the climate, helping the local ecosystem, and preserving our environment.
Thank you, Jean. Good morning, fellow gardeners. My name is Jannell Bryant, and I have the pleasure of presenting some beautiful native plants that are grown in Prince William County. And most of these will grow in the Piedmont area as well as down here in the tidal area 7A, and this is where I live, close to the Potomac River. So I will begin. The first picture here you see is of Rudbeckia maxima, and this was taken in late spring, and this is in the children's bed at the teaching garden. As understood areas in our county disappear, our gardens, however large or small, have become a new wild place where the birds, bees, butterflies and insects and small mammals forage for their foods. The following plants are examples of native plants suitable to grow in most suburban areas in the Prince William County area. Now, this is the first one. This is a shrub, and these will be spring blooming plants. Hemimelis intermedia is witch hazel. And this particular one you see in the picture is Hemimelis intermedia, and it flowers in late winter to early spring, and it has just finished flowering out at the teaching garden. The native species is Virginiana, and it flowers in the fall. And these grow in average to humus-rich, fairly moist soil, also clay soils in sun or shade, and they attract birds. The next one is Polygonatum biflorum, and this is Solomon seal, and I really love this plant. It's a perennial that grows to about, it actually grows to about 6 feet tall, and you plant this one in sunshade, in humus-rich soils, and also well-drained soils. Deer will nibble this plant. This is a variegated one, but which they do leave alone, but the deer will nibble it. The next one is Chrysogonum virginianum, which is green and gold. And this is an attractive ground cover that grows best in sun or shade and in moist to dry garden soil. And it is starting to flower now in most gardens. This is a shrub, Itea virginica, which is Virginia's sweet spire, and is a deciduous shrub, and that will grow up to 8 feet tall. Plant this one in sun to part shade, but it does blossom best in more sun. It thrives in moist to very wet, sandy, loamy and clay acid soils. It will tolerate some standing water. This shrub displays good fall colour and makes it an attractive container plant, and I do have some in pots and they're doing very well. The next one is our Ceanothus americanus, is New Jersey tea. This is a small nitrogen fixing shrub with mounding spreading habit, and it grows to about 3 feet tall. Not bothered by deer or rabbits, as it has a distasteful chemical in the leaves. Once established, tolerates drought conditions. This is our native iris, Iris cristata, which is dwarf crested iris, and is a perennial ground cover that grows 4 to 6 inches tall. It is very small. Plant in part to full shade, dry to moist, rocky, acidic and basic soils best. This plant colonizes by rhizomes and can be easily divided. The next one is Aracema trifilum, which is Jack in the pulpit. It is a perennial that grows to 2 feet tall in part sun to shade in moist, wet soils with abundant organic matter. Most wildlife avoid this plant as it has a distasteful chemical in the leaves. Baptisia australis is wild blue indigo. This is a tall spreading nitrogen fixing perennial, and it grows up to 5 feet tall and with attractive bluish green foliage. The pea-like violet blue flowers followed by brown black seed pods, which are poisonous to deer. And a lot of florists will use the black pods in putting in bouquets of flowers. It prefers full to part sun in moist, usually sandy, acidic soil best, and it attracts bees. This is our native columbine, Aquilegia canadensis, and it's a short-lived perennial that grows 1 to 3 feet tall, but it readily reseeds. Plant in full sun to part shade, in wet to dry, well-drained garden soil, so it will grow pretty much anywhere. The deer do like this plant and attracts hummingbirds, bees, butterflies, and hawk moths. This one is Azarum canadense, which is a common wild ginger. This is a semi-evergreen colonizing ground cover for shade areas and moist woodland areas. The reddish flowers appear at ground level beneath the leaves in April and May. Actually, if you get down and pull the leaves back, you will see that the flowers are already visible. The seeds are dispersed by ants. Phlox divaricata is wild blue phlox, attractive ground cover up to about 18 inches tall and grows in any well-drained garden soil and also some rocky soils in filtered sunlight to light shade. Deer and rabbits do browse, unfortunately, and it attracts birds, bees, and butterflies. And this is beautiful in the garden in early spring. Lonicera sempervirens is coral honeysuckle. This is a semi-evergreen vine that can grow up to 30 feet tall, best in full sun to part shade, and adaptable, tolerates many soil conditions, and is drought tolerant. Frequented by hummingbirds, songbirds, bees, butterflies, and insects, and is not bothered by deer. Geranium maculatum is spotted geranium, wild geranium, and also it's called cranespill. An attractive perennial that grows 8 to 28 inches tall. Plant in full sun to part shade in humus-rich, acidic, slightly moist soils best. If planted in full sun, you will need to water it on a regular basis. Attracts birds and native bees. Caesia aurea is golden Alexander's. This is a must-have perennial that grows to 2 feet tall. Plant in full sun to full shade. Moist to wet soils best, including clay. It attracts butterflies, native bees, and parasitoid insects, in other words, beneficial insects. Deer don't bother this one. Hortensia virginica is Virginia bluebells. This is a spring ephemeral which grows up to 28 inches tall and prefers moist, well-drained soils in part shade to shade. Spectacular show of blue flowers in spring. Make sure you intersperse this with other perennials as it will die back after flowering. And this particular picture was taken down at Merrimack Farm, which is a wildlife area in Prince William County, and they are truly magnificent when they're out in flower. This is Viburnum acifolium, and this is maple leaf viburnum, and it's for some reason also called Doc Mackie. And I'm lucky enough to have this growing wild in my yard. It's a deciduous shrub, 4 to 6 feet tall, and plant in full sun to full shade. Mine are growing in part shade and are doing very well. It prefers dry to moist acidic soils, and white flat top flowers attract butterflies, followed by black berries, and the berries are called drupes, which attract birds. The deer do not browse on this plant, and that's probably why it's still growing in my garden, because I'm very close to a park. Aronia melanocarpa is black chokeberry. This is a small deciduous shrub, 3 to 6 feet tall, likes full sun to part shade, and grows in dry to wet soils. I have it growing in my yard in very dry soil and clay, in a wide variety of soil types, including clay. Blackberries appear in September to November, and chokeberry is now grown commercially in Maryland, and the berries may be substituted for blueberries in baking, although you would have to use lots of sugar. Just a note here, along with all the insects, bees, and bugs that visit native plants in the daylight hours, the native plants are also visited at night by many nocturnal moths, bugs, and insects that pollinate plants while we sleep. Now we come to summer blooming plants. This is Coreopsis verticillata, and it's threadleaf Coreopsis. This is an attractive feathery leaf perennial to 3 feet tall. Plant in full sun to parched shade in dry, well-drained soils. Once established, it is drought tolerant. Deer will browse the foliage, and flowers attract songbirds and butterflies. Hydrangea crucifolia is oak leaf hydrangea. This is a large, very showy deciduous shrub up to 10 feet tall and plant in full sun to parched shade in moist, well-drained soils. Not native in Virginia, but it does grow well here. Deer love this shrub, and it will need to be protected with a fence, but it is a beautiful plant. Ilex verticillata is common winterberry. This is a well-shaped, medium-sized deciduous shrub up to 10 feet tall. Prefers moist, clay and acidic soils and tolerates poor drainage. Plant in full sun to full shade. The showy red berries provide a pop of colour in the winter landscape, and birds are attracted to them. This shrub is dioecious and requires compatible male and female plants for berries to form. And this is growing in my garden. Echinacea purpurea is purple coneflower. This popular perennial grows in full sun to parched shade and grows up to 4 feet tall. It prefers moist, loamy soils and is drought tolerant once established. This is a flower of the prairie, but is a welcome addition into local gardens. The plant has rusty leaves and deer usually avoid. Birds, native bees, butterflies and insects flock to the composite flowers. And this is actually one of my very favourite flowers to grow. Asclepias tuberosa is butterfly weed, late emerging perennial that grows 1 to 2 feet tall. Plant in full sun to part sun in moist to dry, well-drained, sandy soils best. Grows from seed and is somewhat slow to establish. It has a large taproot and does not transplant well. I had to dig one out recently and the taproot was 15 inches long, so it's difficult to get out. Attracts many butterfly species, also bees and insects, and is a host plant for monarch butterfly caterpillars. This milkweed species does not have a milky sac. Asclepias syriaca is common milkweed, and we have here with flowers and the pods. This perennial is slow to emerge in spring and grows up to about 6 feet tall, prefers full sun and grows in average garden soil. After flowering, interesting seed pods form. Attracts many butterfly species, also bees and insects, and is host plant for monarch butterfly caterpillars. This milkweed produces a white latex substance when damaged, and deer usually avoid. If you only have a small garden, I suggest you don't plant this particular milkweed. It can be a little aggressive. It forms colonies and takes over. Hibiscus moscutus is swamp or eastern rose mallow with buds here on the side. This very showy perennial grows 3 to 6 feet tall and prefers wet, marshy to moist soils in full sun. It is a nectar source for hummingbirds and for butterflies. The flowers are really quite showy when they come out. Bononia novaeboracensis is New York ironweed. This is a tall perennial, grows 3 to 8 feet tall in full sun to part shade. Best in humus-rich, moist to wet soils, including clay and dry soils. Showy magenta flowers attract songbirds, butterflies, and native bees. Eutrochium fistulosum is Joe Pye weed, and this is a Joe Pye weed bloom. Tall perennial, grows 2 to 8 feet, sometimes taller. This particular one grew to about 12 feet tall. Full sun to part shade and prefers moist to wet, well-drained, humus-rich soils, including clays. Attracts birds, native bees, and other pollinators. Excuse me. Monarda fistulosa is wild bergamot. Also, Monarda didyma is bee balm and it has red flowers. Both plants plant in average to well-drained garden soil in full sun to light shade. They grow to about 4 feet tall. Attracts hummingbirds and pollinators, especially native bees, and are not bothered by deer. Note, please, Monarda fistulosa is quite an aggressive spreader and not a plant to be put into a small garden. This is one of my very favourite plants. Pycnanthemum muticum is mountain mint. A summer perennial, grows 2 to 3 feet tall. Plant in average to moist garden soils in full sun, drought tolerant once established. Not an aggressive spreader, but it does form clumps. This plant is considered a bug magnet and fairly hums with activity on hot summer days. This is an aromatic perennial and is not bothered by deer. We're going to do Symphyotrichum species, and this particular one is oblongifolius, which is aromatic aster. And it flowers in the fall. So the rest of the plants will be fall flowering plants. A showy flowering perennial to 6 feet tall for a sunny location. Tolerant of dry soils, attracts native bees, butterflies, and many insect species, especially skippers. Asters will grow on disturbed sites and can be used for wildlife habitat restoration. They are a genus of about 90 species, both annual and perennial, many of which grow in this region. Physostegia virginiana is obedient plant, a flowering perennial up to 4 feet tall. Plant in moist to dry soils, including clay soil and full sun to part shade. Can be an aggressive spreader if planted in full sun. I have mine planted in part shade to control the spread. And this is the picture of my obedient plant. Also attracts butterflies and beneficial insects, and deer usually don't browse as it is in the mint family and is aromatic. Solidago canadensis, this is a Canada goldenrod. A perennial, grows up 1 to 8 feet tall and prefers moist, well-drained to dry soils in full sun to light shade. Visited by butterflies, native bees, and insects. Many species attract parasitoid insects that target more pest insects. Solidago species is a genus of approximately 110 species that flower from summer through the fall. Wreath, zigzag, grey, rough stem, and early goldenrods are species that grow in this region. Now to the Rudbeckia species, and here we have brown-eyed Susan. Rudbeckia species, which includes black-eyed Susan annual, a brown-eyed Susan a perennial, and orange coneflower a perennial, grow in moist, humus-rich to average soils in full sun and will tolerate some light shade. These plants are considered very low maintenance and are great plants for the beginning gardeners to grow. Rudbeckias will easily reseed. Seeds are relished by goldfinches and chickadees. Rudbeckia laciniata is cutleaf coneflower. It will grow, it is also called green-headed coneflower and grows up to about 6 feet tall and prefers full sun. It tolerates moist, well-drained garden soils and will reseed readily, and I mean reseed readily. Favourite food for goldfinches and chickadees, and they really relish the seeds. Thank you very much, and that is the end of my presentation.
Back to you, Thomas.
Okay, so we do have some questions. We had one question about, let's see, we had one question about pruning honeysuckle. When do you do it? I think Jan may have answered that one. Prune honeysuckle when it's dormant. Is New York ironweed deer resistant?
I have it growing here, and the deer don't bother it, and the deer don't touch it at the teaching garden. So I presume that the deer don't particularly like it at all.
Deb asks, deer ate her ilex or something rather.
Tissalata. Yeah, I think I answered that one. It actually deer resistant, but it could be if you had a smaller plant. Deer will sometimes chew things that are small, not understanding what it is, because they're pretty dumb sometimes. While a plant is smaller, I would just put like chicken wire around it. And when it gets bigger, they shouldn't bother it at all. Do you agree, Jannell?
Yes, I do. I have deer here. They have never touched the shrubs that I have, and they leave them alone.
Could be you just had a small plant and they didn't know what it was.
Or it could be young deer. Young deer have a tendency to eat deer-resistant plants just because they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So that could be it. The only other reason why deer would eat a deer-resistant plant is because there wasn't a lot of food around. But
yeah, if the deer are hungry, they will wrap their tongues just around just about any plant that they can find out.
Yeah.
But usually don't touch plants that have raspy leaves or hairy leaves. Some plants have hairy hairs on the stems or on the back of the leaves. They don't like those. And also they, yeah, okay.
Let's see, we had a question about controlling bee balm, which I think Jean answered. Pull it out on the outer edges.
Yeah, it pulls out easily.
And if you want to control the seed production, cut the flowers off after they're spent and discard them. So that helps the control of these plants as well.
We've got a question about where to start with natives. How do you choose the plants?
First of all, you do a pH test. Remember, I mentioned that, so you know how acidic or how alkaline your soil is. And I would send it to a reputable soil tester, like your land grant colleges. Virginia, it's Virginia Tech. We send our soil samples too, and they do a good analysis. So know your pH, and then check your area. Do you have wet areas? Do you have sun? Check your sun and shade requirements. Check whether you've got clay soil or what. There are plant lists for all those conditions, but know your site first. And then you can go to the various plant lists and you can see whether a plant requires sun, whether it requires shade or part shade, and what kind of soil. If you have a lot of clay soil, you can always add some compost to it to add a little bit more organic matter if a plant requires that. Okay.
Vicky's asking, can you pinch back, cut back natives to control the size or to increase flowering?
Yes, you can. I know I cut back phlox, I think it's between June and July, cut it back to about 7 or 8 inches tall, and that'll control the height of it and produce more flowers. And you can do that with a lot of the other plants as well.
That's right.
Is oak leaf hydrangea native to Maryland? I believe it's native
to Georgia.
Yeah, but
it's the Appalachian Mountains of Georgia where it's native.
Yeah, but it does grow fairly well in Maryland and
Virginia.
Virginia, in the
Yeah.
Carolinas. So it grows pretty well in most of the Piedmont. The other part of the question is, does it still attract a lot of pollinators?
Yes. Yeah, the insects, and we have it growing at the teaching garden, and it attracts butterflies. I've seen butterflies around it and in various insects. But the thing to watch is that the deer absolutely love it and will just about eat it back to the ground. So it has to be fenced.
Is there anywhere to purchase seeds instead of plants?
Yes. There are several seed companies that will sell native plants. One, I think off the top of my head, is Prairie Nursery. And you can get seeds. If you know what kind of seeds you need, you can go on there and find them. There's some other websites. Maybe we can put together a list of.
Ernst Seeds in Pennsylvania is another one.
Yes, yes. And yeah, we can probably put together a slightly better list of seed sources, but there are several online sources for seeds. Again, if you're looking in stores for seeds, particularly your nurseries and things, know the Latin name or the botanical name for the plant that you want to make sure you're getting the right kind of seed.
Kathleen, yes, this is being recorded and it should be available on our YouTube channel, I would say probably by tomorrow afternoon, Friday morning at the latest. Let's see. Will wild blue indigo grow in clay soil?
I am growing mine in clay soil.
Yes, it's growing at the teaching garden and it is definitely in clay soil. Yes.
So Kathleen, one thing I would add is I'm not sure exactly where you're from, but here in Northern Virginia, where it's somewhat suburban, you know, we've got a lot of compacted clay soil, and people associate clay soil with bad soil. Clay soil is really a good soil. Even when it's compacted, a lot of our natives can handle it. It holds a lot of nutrients. So if you've got really dense compacted clay soil, it's a matter of amending it with compost and using native plants to help break up that clay, because they actually will do that for you as their roots drill through. Let's see. I'm removing clumps of Japanese honeysuckle. Is it okay to place something like winterberry in its place?
As long as it's the right conditions for winterberry. Japanese honeysuckle, I don't know whether it grows in shade or sun. Do you, Jannell?
I think it grows just about anywhere. I've seen it growing around here in full sun and also in full shade.
Yeah. So
if it's damp, if the soil's damp, the winterberry would be fine. But if it's in very, very hard packed, you know, hard pan, it might have a little more difficulty growing because it's more a plant for moist areas.
Yeah. You could add some compost to it, but it does require some sun.
You would have to put a lot of amendments in it, but you would probably have to water it if it's super dry.
Do rabbits eat coneflowers?
No.
No, I haven't had any problems with rabbits eating coneflowers, but if you have native phlox, tall garden phlox, yes, they will eat that. They will eat it to the ground.
Okay. Is hibiscus holy grail a native?
No, it's a cultivar.
Right. Butterfly bush, is that a native? No.
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 Butterfly weed is the native.
Butterfly weed is yes.
Yeah. Yes. And it's not a shrub. It's a perennial. Actually, it self-seeds itself.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's a wonderful plant.
Is there a list of natives that will grow near black walnut trees?
Oh,
I'd have to research that one.
Yeah, I would have to research that one too.
I would say yes, there are probably plants that do grow near black walnut trees because black walnuts are native.
I just don't know.
It's only a few. I don't know them offhand.
Yeah, we'd have to research that. If you send an email to mastergardener@pwc.gov, pwcgov.org, ask that question, we can research it and then get back to you with it.
And tell us what area you're from too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any suggestions for replacing turf in a yard?
Plant natives.
Plant natives, yes, indeed.
So, yeah, let
the natives reseed and let them go.
The first question really is, will your HOA allow you to do that? Mm-hmm. There actually are some native turf grasses. Red creeping fescue, for example, is a grass that you can grow. It will grow about 6 to 8 inches and stop. Doesn't require a whole lot of maintenance. Maybe mow it once or twice a year. That could be an option. It really depends on your HOA. That's probably the closest that would look like turf. Because it is a turf. You also could try sheep's fescue, which is has a bluish tone to it, and it grows in clumps. So it doesn't look like a manicured sort of carpet, but it looks like clumps of grass. That's another issue. The second part of the question is, and is tolerant to being walked on? No. Unfortunately, most of the things that are turf replacements, particularly in shaded areas, are not tolerant to a lot of foot traffic. I mean, they can be walked on, but they just can't be walked on a lot. And if you've got a high use area, you probably want to put in some kind of either mulch path or stepping stones or something like that.
Yeah. And I just want to add quickly in Doug Ptolemy's book, his most recent one, Nature's Best Hope, he talks about, HOA aside, and there's some that are more restricted than others, that, if you have a high use area like kids' playground or something, growing, grass is okay, but try to include borders and garden areas to break up that turf and plant native plants. You just have to adapt to your local situation, but, try to make less turf wherever possible.
And worst case, add white clover.
Right.
White clover is handy for a lot of pollinators, and it blends in with grass. And actually, if you add white clover into your lawn, you'll actually have to use less fertilizer because clover will produce nitrogen. Our next question is about, I hate having to pronounce these. Clethra anifolia. Is it a good plant to use instead of Itea?
You're talking about Clethra, the Clethera?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Clethra is an excellent plant to use. It has a wonderful fragrance. And when it blooms around June or July. And yes, it is definitely a great native plant. And good choice.
How do you know you're buying you're buying butterfly weed instead of butterfly bush, since they are similar?
If you want butterfly weed, buy Schleppsia tuberosa, and we can send that name out to you. And butterfly bush is a shrub, and the butterfly weed is a plant.
Perennial.
Yeah. So anyway, they're two entirely different things, but it's the Schleppius tuberosa that you want for the butterfly weed.
Maggie asked, what would you recommend for an area in front of the house that's sunny and needs to be tidier?
Um, look at some of the sun-loving ones that Jannell showed. You know, if you take, for example, that Coreopsis verticillata, which is has small yellow flowers, it has a thread-like kind of leaf. It has a beautiful plant that's, you know, doesn't grow real tall and makes beautiful garden plant. I don't know, Jannell, can you think of any others?
The other one that I grow here, and it's one of my very favorite plants, is the orange coneflower.
Yeah.
That one only grows to about no more than about 3 feet tall, and it does flower prolifically. Like most native plants getting towards the end of the season when they're dying back, is that they will get a little untidy looking.
Yeah.
And that's why some people stay away from them.
But your coneflower also is a nice plant.
Purple coneflower is an excellent choice, but it's not native to Virginia, but it is an American native plant. So you could grow that one. Actually, a couple of the goldenrods that are smaller in size, they don't grow 6 or 8 feet tall, though. Right. I think it's the gray goldenrod. It will only grow to about 2.5 feet tall and flower in the fall. If you want to put in ground covers, you can put green and gold as a ground cover. You could also use sedum natum as a small ground cover that has cute little white flowers on it later on in the spring.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot you can grow in the sun.
But if you want to grow them in rows, forget it. They will grow wherever they want to grow. They spread themselves around over several years, and they do need to be divided about every 3 years.
Okay. I have no clue how to pronounce this. Deschampsia I'm sorry?
Can you spell it?
Sure. DESCHAMPSIA. That sound familiar?
No,
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, well,
look see if I can
look
find
that up. In the meantime, Little William's Sweet Spire, is that native?
No, the cultivar.
It's a cultivar.
Right.
Yeah.
Allison's asking, what's a good native shade ground cover? Depending on how much shade you have, there are several. Off the top of my head, the fine fescues come to mind. We have a video on ground covers. That's probably your best reference off the top of my head, Allison. But if you send us an email, we can look that up for you as well and give you a list.
You can also use green and gold as a ground cover. The native ginger is a small plant that's a ground cover. The phlox can be a ground cover as they don't grow very tall. And the phlox is beautiful show in the springtime. Another one you could grow is the little iris cristata. That's only about 6 inches tall. You can use that as a ground cover in a shady area.
Golden groundsill, I think, is another one.
I'm not familiar with that. Oh, I'm not really familiar with that one at all. But the Phlox divaricata is a lovely ground cover, and it has beautiful flowers in the spring. And it stays green all year round. It does not die back.
I just looked up that Deschampsia, and it says it's native to many countries, but I've never heard of it, and I don't think it's native to the Piedmont region of Virginia at all.
No, I just checked it on our list here, and it's not mentioned at all.
Yeah.
Does it mention the common name?
No, it was called tufted hairgrass. Yeah, it's called tufted hairgrass.
Let let me think. I've heard of that plant, and I think I'm not sure how aggressively it spreads, but it's one of those that can be a little aggressive. I'm not sure how aggressive it is versus other plants, though.
Yeah, yeah.
I would argue, too, it's not a native grass to Virginia.
Yeah, it's not native. I would agree with you on that.
Let's see. Do spice plants grow in part shade?
Yes, they do. They're growing on the edge of my woods.
Somebody added the comment of leaving the coneflowers to overwinter for seeds for birds. I know some people don't like that because of the untidiness, but keep in mind with any plant, you can get it to look really showy and beautiful for a while, but it can't sustain that. All plants need, some time to kind of rest, and they don't look their best. And, allowing coneflower to rest over winter and keeping it a little bit rough looking will definitely help the birds that are trying to overwinter.
Yes, the other thing is that if you leave your native plants till spring before you begin to cut them back, they usually look nice in the winter landscape when there's a lot of snow around. It just makes an architectural feature in your yard. But it is important that you do leave them in the fall, but particularly the rudbeckias, the solidagos, the coneflowers. It's important that migrating birds migrating through have a place to get some food as they're flying through. I know I've had whole flocks of birds come to my garden to eat the rudbeckias and the coneflower seeds.
Yeah, and sometimes there are, on some of the thicker stems, there are native insects that actually inhabit those thicker stems to overwinter. So it's important to leave them for that reason too.
Let's see. Is Queen Anne's lace native?
No. It's all over the world, but it's not native to the United States. It is naturalized here, but it is not native.
And I would argue that there are enough members of that umbel family that there are probably some native umbels there that could replace Queen Anne's lace if you still want that kind of look.
Right.
And Queen Anne's lace really is, it's not one of those, it's naturalized. So it's one that has adapted to our environment, and the insects have adapted to it. So it's not sterile. It's not like some plants that have no value. Queen Anne's lace does have some value.
Yes.
It's just
and
not native.
It's attractive in the landscape.
What are some native perennials that bloom for long spans of time?
Well, personally, I think the brown-eyed Susans, the black-eyed Susans, and everything, they will go from like June through September. I don't know. Can you think of any more?
Actually, the orange coneflowers, they will start flowering in late summer, early fall, and they will flower right through to hard frost.
Right.
And but most native plants, they have their season like most plants. It's several weeks long. But if you have Zizia growing in the golden Alexanders growing in your garden, the flowers will last the usual several weeks, but they stay green. They don't die back. So that still gives you a little bit of color, but there's no flowers after the flowering season. Most native plants will only flower for about 3 weeks. It's short. They have their moment in the sun and then they die back.
Allison made an important comment. Plants with hollow stems host a lot of bugs.
True.
To overwinter, so leave those up also if you can overwinter.
Yes, absolutely.
Joe pieweed is hollow in the center, and that's an example. I leave mine up and cut it back during the winter or early spring.
Yeah, and a lot of bees will actually nest in there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Is sugar shack shrub native to Maryland? Probably not, because it sounds like a cultivar.
I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
Its Latin name is Cephalanthus.
Cephalanthus.
Isn't that the New Jersey tea? I'm not sure, but that sugar shack sounds like a cultivar, as Tom said. I'll look it up.
New Jersey tea is Ceanothus. Not
Okay.
And there are
Sorry.
there have been natives that have been, for lack of a better term, domesticated and turned into cultivars. The problem with them is that usually in that process, they lose some of their value to native wildlife. In some cases, it means that they're sterile. In some cases, it means that their nectar doesn't have the same attractant, or their nectar doesn't have the same nutritional value.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sugar shack is a cultivar of buttonbush, but
buttonbush, yeah. But the native buttonbush is a good plant if you've got the right conditions for it. But it, yeah, that is a cultivar.
Pilar asked about Meadows Farm selling butterfly weed, but he hasn't seen it there. I would recommend you ask for it. Let's see. I believe that's our last question.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for attending and staying with us. And thank you, Jean and Jannell, for presenting.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
viewing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great job, ladies and Thomas, as always. I really enjoyed it.
As I mentioned earlier, the recording of this should be up by tomorrow afternoon on our YouTube page, which is VCE Prince William. Next week, I believe we have Attracting Native Birds is our class. And then we'll have container gardening starting in April, and then rain gardens on the 14th of April. That's what's coming up next, and we will see you all next time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for coming, and thank you, ladies.
Thank you.